I think I'm his mother.
The nurse said Eli had less than an hour left without a transplant match, and Daniel had already been rejected by every donor registry in the state. Then a woman he hadn't seen in 6 years walked through the doors, still in her factory uniform, and said the words that changed everything. I think I'm his mother. Daniel Ferris had raised his son alone since birth, working double shifts at a warehouse to afford an apartment 2 bus rides from the only hospital that treated Eli's rare blood disorder. Nobody at that warehouse knew the exhausted man loading trucks each night also taught himself pediatric hematology from library books just to understand his own son's chart. Eli was 3 years old, small for his age, with the kind of quiet patience children develop when hospitals become as familiar as playgrounds. Daniel had never once let him see fear, though doctors had explained, gently but clearly, that without a genetic match for an experimental transplant, Eli's condition would become untreatable within days. 6 years earlier, Daniel's relationship with Marisol Vega had ended abruptly when her family relocated overseas for her father's work. A departure so sudden, Daniel never learned she'd been pregnant, believing instead she had simply chosen to disappear from his life without explanation, a wound he'd carried quietly ever since. Marisol had spent those same 6 years raising a daughter alone in another country, working factory shifts to survive after her family's promised stability collapsed within a year of relocating, never once suspecting the child support paperwork lost in international mail had cost Daniel any knowledge of a daughter who might exist somewhere, too. She had returned to the city only 3 days earlier, chasing a factory job transfer, and had recognized Daniel's name on a hospital donor bulletin board entirely by chance. A coincidence so improbable that when she read Eli's specific rare blood type listed beside an urgent transplant request, something in her chest had gone completely still. "My daughter has the exact same condition," Marisol said, standing breathless in the hallway, still in her factory uniform, badge swinging from her collar. "The same blood markers. I've spent 4 years learning everything about this disorder because doctors kept telling me hers was too rare to ever find a match." Daniel stared at her, 6 years of buried hurt colliding instantly with the desperate hope flooding through him. "Your daughter has this condition too? How is that even possible?" Marisol's hands trembled as she pulled out worn medical documents she'd carried for years, hoping, without ever daring to fully believe, they might someday matter to someone. The attending physician, called urgently to the hallway, reviewed both children's genetic profiles within minutes and confirmed what neither parent had dared hope for: an extraordinarily rare partial match, viable precisely because both children shared a genetic marker traceable only through one specific bloodline neither parent had known still connected them. "There's something else," the physician said carefully, looking between them. "This kind of genetic overlap in unrelated children is essentially impossible unless they share a parent." The hallway went silent. Marisol's daughter, it turned out, wasn't simply a coincidental match. She was Eli's half-sister, born 4 months after Marisol's sudden departure. Daniel sat down hard on a hospital bench, the last 6 years rearranging themselves instantly in his mind, every assumption about abandonment collapsing beneath a truth neither of them had known to look for. "You had my daughter," he said quietly, "and I never knew. And now she might be the reason Eli survives this week." Marisol's hands covered her face. "I tried calling for months after we moved. The number was disconnected. I thought you'd changed it on purpose. I was 8 months pregnant and terrified, and eventually I just told myself you'd made your choice." Daniel shook his head slowly. "I never got a single call. I thought you left because of me." The transplant procedure moved forward within 48 hours. Marisol's daughter, Camilla, undergoing careful medical evaluation while both parents sat together in a waiting room. Neither of them had ever expected to occupy side by side again. 6 years of separate grief suddenly tangled into one shared, terrifying hope. Camilla, 4 years old, met her half-brother for the first time in a pre-operative room. both children too young to understand the weight of the moment, simply curious about each other in the uncomplicated way small children absorb enormous news. Eli reaching out to touch her hand through the hospital rail without hesitation. "Are you my sister?" Eli asked, and Camilla nodded seriously, the way children nod when adults have clearly told them something important without fully explaining why. Marisol watched the exchange with tears she no longer tried to hide. 6 years of raising a daughter who now, impossibly, had a brother and a father in the same room. But we don't believe a coincidence like this happens without a quieter story beneath it. A hospital records clerk named Priya, working overnight shifts years earlier, had insisted on manually cross-referencing rare blood disorder cases across regional databases despite the extra unpaid hours it required. Refusing to let understaffing mean a possible match went permanently unnoticed. A pediatric nurse named Ottilie had spent years personally maintaining that donor bulletin board, updating it meticulously by hand, even after the hospital switched to a digital system nobody outside the building could easily access, insisting a physical board in a hallway might catch someone's eye, a computer search never would. Neither of them ever met Daniel or Marisol directly. Both of them shaped the exact chain of small persistence that put a handwritten bulletin board in a hallway a factory worker happened to walk past on her 3rd day back in the city, carrying a folder of medical records she'd never stopped keeping close, just in case. The transplant succeeded. Eli recovered fully within 3 weeks, color returning to his face in a way Daniel had almost forgotten to hope for. And Camilla, whose own rare condition had been quietly worsening for years without an accessible donor pool large enough to help her either, received matched treatment protocols developed directly from the case. Those protocols are now available to other children with the same overlooked disorder, the hospital's genetics team publishing findings that acknowledged, specifically, the unusual circumstances that led to their discovery, a footnote neither Daniel nor Marisol ever expected their private tragedy to become. Daniel and Marisol spent the following months in careful, deliberate conversation, not rushing toward reconciliation, simply learning who the other person had become across 6 years neither of them had chosen to spend apart. 2 parents figuring out how to raise 2 children who were, undeniably, already a family. Eli and Camilla see each other every weekend now, a routine that started as hospital visits and slowly became something closer to simply being siblings, building blanket forts and arguing over cartoons the way children do when nobody has told them their bond began with something as serious as a matching genetic marker. Daniel keeps the hospital's original handwritten bulletin board notice framed in Eli's room now. A strange keepsake, he admits, but one that reminds him daily how close an entire family came to never finding each other. All because a nurse refused to trust a database more than a hallway wall. Never assume a person disappeared by choice before asking what silence might have actually been hiding. Sometimes the family you're missing isn't gone, just waiting on the other side of a coincidence nobody thought to look for yet. Thank you for joining just a moment. We're so glad you're here.